There is a question that almost no one dares to face honestly, a question that sounds simple on the surface, but if answered truthfully, it can shake every belief society has planted in men for decades. That question is, why are single men holding an advantage that the world conveniently ignores? We're living in an era where men are pressured to date, to have someone beside them, to marry on time in order to be considered stable and valuable. From childhood to adulthood, they're taught that a complete man is one who has love, a family, and a relationship to prove his worth. But have you ever wondered, is that actually true? Or just a mold society forces you into because it's easier to control? The image of the single man has long been painted as someone lonely, sad, incomplete, and lost. But when you look closely, when you remove the layers of expectation, you see a completely different truth. The single man is not weak, not pitiful. On the contrary, he is living the exact life many men once dreamed of but didn't dare pursue because of outside pressure. A life with freedom, space, choice, and the quiet needed to focus on himself and build his future on his own terms. A life that most men, if honest with themselves, have wished for at least once. This is not encouragement to be lonely, nor is it a call to reject love. It is a gentle reminder, a truth hidden for far too long. Sometimes the man who lives alone sees life more clearly than those trying so hard to fit in. And that's when you begin to realize, maybe the real advantage isn't having someone beside you, but understanding yourself so deeply that you no longer need anyone to prove your worth. When you start seeing that truth with clearer eyes, you'll notice something else. The advantage of the single man isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, subtle, but powerful enough to change the entire quality of life. That advantage is freedom, the asset most men only realize the value of when it's already gone. Freedom here isn't loneliness or running from responsibility. It is the return of focus, of a mind no longer pulled back and forth by the needs, expectations, or emotions of someone else. In psychology, this is called cognitive load, the mental burden. When in the wrong relationship or an emotionally chaotic environment, men must use energy to manage someone else's moods, guess their intentions, balance emotions, and sometimes deal with problems that were never theirs to begin with. But when you're single, that burden disappears. No more long text threads demanding explanations, no more silent cold wars, no more fear of disappointing someone just because you're busy chasing your goals. Freedom brings men back to ownership of their schedule. You can wake up early to train, stay up late to build a project, or spend an entire evening learning a new skill. Freedom also returns men to their own body and rest. You sleep when you need to, work when you want to, and don't have to divide your energy for unnecessary conversations or emotional negotiations. It is freedom from someone else's emotional agenda, their needs, expectations, and feelings that you were forced to carry even though they weren't yours. And it is precisely in that moment that a man truly sees his inner strength. We are living in the era of deep work, the era where focus is a superpower. And who possesses this superpower the most? Those men who have space, silence, and the ability to pour 100% of their energy into what they choose. While many people constantly negotiate between work, emotions, relationships, and overlapping responsibilities, the single man has only one negotiation, the negotiation with his best possible self. This is not random privilege. It is freedom earned through clarity, through the courage to step outside society's imposed templates. And when a man holds freedom in his hands, he isn't just living his life, he is designing it. It is precisely when a man begins to design his own life that he discovers an even greater privilege than free time and autonomy, a different kind of quiet power, deeper and more subtle, something most men lose without even realizing they've lost it. It is emotional control, because freedom is not just about what you're allowed to do, but about no longer being spun around by someone else's emotions. This is exactly where single men hold a superior advantage over everyone else. In the wrong relationship, a man pays a dangerous kind of tax, what modern psychology calls emotional tax. It's a tax not paid with money, but with mental energy. Every time you have to guess why someone is upset, every time you have to make peace even when you're not wrong, every time you postpone your goals to manage someone else's emotions, you are paying that tax, little by little. And the scariest part is that most men don't realize they've been silently drained by this invisible tax. But when you are single, emotional tax drops close to zero. No more cold wars, no more silent punishment, no more constant emotional adjustments just to keep someone satisfied. You return to your own emotional baseline, a state of stability, clarity, and non-chaotic balance. This gives men an advantage. Few recognize a man with a stable baseline is always stronger than a man who must constantly respond to someone else's emotional turbulence. Society often demands that men be the pillar, be steady, endure everything, and always remain calm. But ironically, those expectations are exactly what break many men. When you always have to appear strong, you no longer have space to truly be strong, and this is why, when men are single, they regain what was lost the longest, the ability to lead their own emotions. They become sharper because they're no longer living in defensive mode. They become calmer because they no longer have to handle storms that don't belong to them. And they become more decisive because their spirit is no longer worn down by invisible daily battles. That's why people say, a man who doesn't need validation is dangerous, but in a good way. A man who doesn't need validation to exist cannot easily be shaken. He cannot be manipulated, dragged into drama, or made to lose himself just to keep someone from leaving. And when your emotions are in your hands, not someone else's, you become the strongest version of yourself, because true strength has never been muscles or money. True strength has always started here inside your ability to master what happens within you. When a man regains control of his emotions, the next thing he clearly sees is how his mental energy directly links to his finances, because emotional stability creates clear thinking, and clear thinking creates good decisions. And one of the most important decisions for men in the volatile world of 2024-2025 is financial freedom. This is no longer a luxurious concept or a distant dream. It is a survival requirement. The modern economy shifts too fast. Markets move constantly, and unexpected risks can appear any time. In such a world, single men hold a massive advantage. They don't carry financial burdens tied to expectations, obligations, or someone else's emotional needs. No obligatory gifts. No spending to keep peace, no small but accumulating costs just to avoid conflict. When you're single, money isn't spent buying temporary harmony. It becomes leverage to invest in yourself. You don't buy flowers, you buy books. You don't pay for temporary silence, you pay for courses that increase your value. You don't spend to fill someone else's emotional void, you invest in the strongest version of yourself. And it is at this moment that money truly becomes a tool. In personal development, there is an important concept called financial optionality, the ability to change your life through financial power. When you have money, you have options. You can switch careers if you want. You can leave a toxic environment without fear. You can relocate to a new city, invest in a new project, or spend months changing the entire direction of your life. You have the power to alter your destiny without asking anyone for permission. That is not a luxury. That is power. And what few people mention is this financial freedom always comes with mental freedom. When you don't have to worry about meeting someone's expectations, your mind becomes clearer, your sleep improves, and your goals sharpen. You act from choice, not obligation. You move because you want to, not because you fear, and from that mental freedom you gain the greatest freedom of all the freedom to design your life according to the values you truly believe in. Thus, in a world that demands men pay a price for everything, single men possess a gift they often fail to recognize. Immediately their money isn't being drained, it is being reinvested. And what is built through that investment becomes the future they truly desire. When a man has financial freedom in his hands, he begins to notice a deeper layer of freedom unfolding before him. Because when money is no longer a fear, the mind finally has space to think, to reflect, to ask, what life do I truly want to live? And from that question, another kind of freedom emerges, a freedom no one can give you. You can only claim it for yourself. It is the freedom of thought, intellectual freedom. This is where single men gain an advantage many never reach, because so many are trapped by obligations, expectations, and the fear of disappointing someone else. When you're single, you don't have to bend your thoughts, filter your words, or adjust your opinions just to keep the peace or protect someone else's emotions. And in that space, your thinking becomes sharper. You're allowed to think bigger, to ask deeper questions, to confront the truth more clearly. Modern psychology calls this self-authoring, the ability to write your own life story, instead of living according to a script society hands you: graduate, date, marry, have kids, settle down, repeat a model no one even remembers the reason for. When you're single, you escape that script. You begin to think independently instead of being guided by the fear of losing affection. When you no longer worry, will this upset someone or will it create conflict? Your mind becomes more logical and less reactive. You observe the world with clarity, without being clouded by the need to be loved or accepted. And more importantly, when the fear of loneliness disappears, a man returns to the strongest version of himself. Because fear is always what suffocates thought. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being judged. Fear of not fitting the mold. But when you realize you live well, strong, and clear even without anyone validating your existence, your mind expands naturally. You begin to think like a man who truly owns his life, and when thought is liberated, you don't just live better, you live more authentically. Because now, you're no longer chasing someone else's story, you're writing your own. When a man begins writing his own story, he doesn't just change the way he thinks, he changes the way he moves through life. Because free thinking always leads to another layer of freedom, freedom in action. And this is where single men step into a zone of power that many others cannot access. Life suddenly becomes an open experiment, unrestrained, unconfined, unbounded by invisible compromises. In behavioral science, this is called behavioral flexibility, the freedom to act without internal restriction, and single men possess it at the highest level. You can change your life's direction with a single decision. You can switch careers when the old path no longer feels right. You can sign up for a new course simply because it sparks your curiosity. You can travel for a month to reset your mind without needing to explain anything to anyone. You can build a project from zero without worrying someone will feel neglected. Singleness gives you the freedom to try, fail, adjust, and advance without being pulled back by guilt or fear that your growth will hurt someone else. And this freedom opens a critical door, the rediscovery of passion, discipline, and purpose. When you no longer have to play the accidental hero, no longer carry emotional or financial responsibilities for someone else, you can pour all of your energy into finding your true self again. The things that once excited you, the goals that once kept you up at night, the plans you once abandoned because you were busy taking care of someone else, all of them reignite in silence. What's fascinating is this: the single phase is always when men upgrade the fastest. Not because they are lonely, but because they have space to evolve. No noise, no drama, no demands to sacrifice yourself for peace. Only you facing the choice become better or stay the same. And most men, when granted this silence, choose to rise. They focus deeper. They build stronger discipline. They become more powerful because their entire life is now in their own hands. This isn't rebellion. This is evolution. Because when you realize you can change direction at any moment, you begin to live like a truly free man, one who doesn't just exist in life, but actively leads it down the path he chooses. It is exactly when a man steps into that stage of limitless growth that he begins to realize a deeper truth than anything he has ever understood before when life is no longer controlled. When his mind is free, his actions are free, and his goals are clear, he unintentionally enters the final form of privilege, a privilege no money, no status, no external success can buy. It is emotional independence, the ultimate privilege. Because when you are no longer tied to the idea that you must have someone beside you, when you no longer treat women or love as the center of your worth, you become a completely different version of yourself, a stronger version, a clearer version, a version much harder to shake. Single men do not love out of lack. They love because they want to expand their world, not to patch a hole inside their heart. They enter a relationship with the mindset of someone who is sharing abundance, not someone seeking rescue. Modern psychology calls this attachment independence, freedom from the fear of abandonment. When you no longer fear losing someone, you can no longer be dragged into emotional manipulation. You no longer fear having to appease someone, and you no longer need to sacrifice your identity just to keep the peace. And this is what creates the unique magnetism of single men they choose. They don't beg. They love from a place of intention, not anxiety. They know how to leave when needed, stay when they want, and protect the peace they spent years building. From this position, every relationship becomes a bonus, not a refuge. Not a place to hide from loneliness, but a place where two people elevate each other. Not an emotional transaction, but a meeting of two individuals who are already whole in their own ways. When a man reaches this state, He becomes naturally attractive, not flashy, not forced, not chasing anyone. Simply because self-mastery radiates an energy people want to be close to. He doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't need to flatter anyone. He doesn't need to fight for attention. He attracts because he stands firmly in his own world, and this is what completes the entire journey a single man can walk through freedom of time, freedom of emotion, freedom of finances, freedom of thought, freedom of action, all leading him to the ultimate form of strength, the strength of a man who no longer needs anyone to complete him. Because the truth is this, a man who does not need anyone to make him whole is the man who is truly free.